Good evening. Welcome to you all. I'm Alex Jones. I'm director of the Joan Shorenstein Center on the Press, Politics, and Public Policy here at the Kennedy School. And we are jointly sponsoring tonight's event with the Institute of Politics. The person who would have been standing here welcoming you is Jean Shaheen, but she is, I'm sorry to say, under the weather and couldn't be here. She is, I'm told, facing a flight to Nigeria, and I think it's very wise of her to try to get herself back together, because doing that sick would really be a problem. I think that you are in store for something very interesting. As I think some of you probably know, the Shorenstein Center and the Institute of Politics have jointly been putting on this series of conversations with the people who are running, not the campaign candidates themselves, but the people who are running the campaigns for the presidency on both sides for 2008. We had thought that we were going to be starting early, before things started getting heated up, but that did not prove to be the case. We're deep in. It is a very, very fast, furious, and heated race already. And I think that the comments we have heard from the campaigns and the comments we will hear tonight will reflect that real tension. Tension ideologically, tension in terms of competition between candidates for money, endorsements, and so forth, strategy. The thing that we have done in the early stage of the campaign is something that the Institute of Politics has done after the campaign is over for many years. Every year there is a presidential election. In the wake of it, the people who have run the presidential campaigns come to the Kennedy School and talk about what happened, who did what to whom, who went up to whom, how it all worked. We thought that it would be good to try to get those same people to talk in anticipation of what the campaign is going to be, so that we could get a sense of what was to come and make some judgments and have some insight at this stage of the game. The people who are really responsible for this are on the stage, Mark Halpern and Mark Mckinnon. We feel enormously gratified to have these two real professionals with us at the Kennedy School this semester. Mark Halpern is the chief political analyst for ABC News and is one of the people who has been steeped in politics and political reporting for many years. He is the founder of The Note, something that I suspect many of you look at daily. He is someone who is also a joint fellow this semester at the Shorenstein Center and the Institute of Politics. He is paired with Mark Mckinnon, who is on the other side of the equation. Mark Halpern is a reporter. Mark Mckinnon is one of the real superbly talented political communicators. He was the chief political communications person for the George W. Bush campaign, both in 2000 and 2004. He has a checkered history, started as a Democrat and migrated to the Republican Party. Matured, I say. Well, at the Kennedy School, we don't look at it usually quite that way. But it has been a real joy, and I want to say to both of them, having them here this semester has just been wonderful, and we hope that we're going to be seeing more of both of you in the months and years to come. Tonight, the deal is that Mark Mckinnon and Mark Halpern are going to do the interviewing, essentially leading a conversation rather than a series of interviews. And the people on the stage between them are representatives of several campaigns. I'm now going to turn it over to Mark Mckinnon, who will introduce them.
Thank you very much. Delighted to have our third session here this evening, and I'm going to run through our group of representatives here, and start with Rich Gaylord. Rich is a cross between a political hack and a philosopher, and is well known in our world for a terrific communication that he puts out called Mullings, which, like the Note, is prescribed reading for any political junkies out there. And if you don't get it, you ought to get a hold of him, make sure you get on the reading list. You'll be smarter and wiser for it. Rich, by the way, is kind of our utility player tonight. Rich is familiar with all these campaigns and is going to represent and reflect on those particular campaigns that are not represented here tonight, because we just don't have enough room on the stage for everybody. Joe Gaylord is a well-known commodity here as a is a recent fellow, and so he's returning to his alma mater here. And Joe is a senior advisor and strategist for Newt Gingrich, and well known for all his work that he did for the '94 campaign to elect the Republican majority. He was the executive director of the National Republican Congressional Committee and named co-campaign manager of the year by the American Political Consulting for his work in 1994. Steve Grubbs has come to us from Iowa, ground zero, is always ground zero, but I think we may reflect that may be even more the case this year. And Governor Tommy Thompson, one of the two Thompsons maybe running. We know one is for sure, but Governor Thompson is very lucky to have Steve aboard representing his campaign. Steve was chairman of the GOP in '97 and '98, and is a great representative for the Governor Thompson campaign in Iowa and beyond. Tony Jewell is also chief strategist and spokesman for Governor Thompson, served as his press secretary, and worked for Governor Thompson when he was Secretary of Health and Human Services. Chip Saltzman is representing Governor Mike Huckabee. Chip is campaign manager and also worked for Senate Majority Bill Frist, and was a two-time pioneer for the president. Thank you very much for that. And Rick Tyler is representing Newt Gingrich as well. Rick is a communications director for Gingrich Communications, which, given how savvy that operation is, and he is, that's quite a nod to have that particular role, and requires great skill and agility that Rick brings to the table. Former executive director of the Maine Republican Party. So, Mark, I'm going to kick off, if I may, and just say one thing that I was reminded of recently as we were doing these sessions that surprised me. I had forgotten completely, and I suspect this will surprise maybe some of you and some in our audience, that in 2004, in the Democratic primary anyway, which was the contested primary in 2004, the person that led that race for 8 months in 35 national polls was, drum roll, Joe Lieberman. Now, Joe Lieberman is, an afterthought. I mean, not he's a U.S. Senator, of course, but as we look back in that race, I mean, if you remember Howard Dean, you remember John Kerry, you remember Edwards, but it's a pretty vague memory of Joe Lieberman being much. So my point is that if that's an example of 2004, I think that some might suggest that this deck is likely to be shuffled just as it was in 2004, and the field as it lays today may be quite different come November, and I assume that most of you would say that that's likely to happen. So with that in mind, you want to reflect on just how this is different, the timetable's moved up, and how does this play for your particular candidates or others in the field? Start. Joe, you want to kick off on that?
Well, it's easy for me because I don't have a campaign. Speaker Gingrich has not indicated at all that he's going to run for president. He hasn't indicated that he's not going to run for president. He's one of the people that I think have the luxury of waiting a later period of time because he's a known commodity. And I think if I could reflect accurately on his thinking, what he has said is that if there appears to be a vacuum sometime in October, he's never been shy about filling vacuums, and that might very well be the case. But it strikes me that I think it was Rick that said to him, and I don't want to steal Rick's line, but since he wasn't doing anything, he was doing very well at doing nothing, so he ought to keep doing nothing because he'll continue to do very well.
Nothing's a pretty good strategy.
And it seems like whatever it is, it's working at this point, until Senator Thompson from Tennessee decided that he might try the same strategy. I think what all of that says is that there is a good deal of unrest in the Republican Party about who it might be that should be our nominee. The only thing I think we know for sure tonight is to say that we will have one.
Let me pick up on something Joe said. First of all, let me say that in honor of Passover at halftime, I'm going to play God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen on these. I think you'll be very interested when I do it. The fact is that there's a new Gallup poll. It was in the field at 2nd through the 5th. I just happened to spot it before I came over here. That has Rudy Giuliani at 38% on the Republican side, and Senator Clinton at 38% on the Democratic side. And apropos what Joe was just saying, on both sides, I think it is interesting that virtually 2/3 or almost 2/3 of the party faithful are looking at someone else, or at least interested in somebody else, or at least interested in some options. So the notion of this thing beginning to solidify is a long way away from that. I was covering, so to speak, the 2003 primary from Baghdad, as it turned out. And I can remember getting emails from people like Halperin and Dan Balls and Fournier telling me about what was going on in Iowa. And you may remember that on, I think it was December 12th, 2003, Howard Dean had so cemented his role as the probative nominee that even Al Gore decided to finally jump on his bandwagon, which was something people that followed Al Gore in the Senate knew to be Al Gore's MO, that he'd wait until it was over and then jump on the winning side. And 6 weeks later, Dean was out of that race. So I think for the second, or in some cases third tier of candidates on both sides, hope springs eternal. If you can stay in the game at all, then you have a shot when things begin to settle out way down the road.
Well, and Governor Thompson, Tommy Thompson, not to confuse our Thompsons here, is banking on there is not that sense of inevitability in the Republican Party for the first time in anybody's memory, essentially. And he's looking back, when he looks for history, he's turning to Democrats, and he keeps comparing himself to Jimmy Carter and to a certain extent John Kerry, and we have trouble wrapping our minds around that he's comparing himself to Carter and Kerry as Republicans. But as he's in Iowa, and Steve can talk to you about this, the people he's talking to, they're not sold on the so-called big three. Everybody's willing to listen at this point.
Chip, that Jimmy Carter reference isn't lost on you, is it?
Well, no, and I guess being the only Southern governor in the race, too, and Governor Huckabee compares himself to Bill Clinton, go figure that one out. So, but what Mark's point brings up probably crystal clear is that Lieberman was in the lead for 8 months. And if you look back over the last couple of presidential campaign cycles, I mean, when Reagan was running or George Bush was running the first time, the news cycle was the 5 o'clock news and the Sunday paper. That was the news cycle. You had 7 days to move a story. When you guys were running, it was now CNN's time, and it was a 24-hour news cycle where at the top of the hour you could ingest something into the news cycle and let it spin out. Now with the bloggers, it's literally a 15 to 10-minute cycle that you can constantly churn over the news. So I think you're going to see these polls when they really start going, they're going to flip several times over before it ever gets done. And so you're going to see people that were the front runners. I mean, I used to work for the next president of the United States, Bill Frist. He didn't run. A year ago, George Allen was the next president of the United States. Well, he's not running. 6 months ago, it was John McCain, and 3 months ago, it was Mitt Romney, and now it's Rudy Giuliani. There's a lot, the road to the White House is long and windy, and there's a lot of dead carcasses of the next president of the United States. And so as campaigns that we're represented here, our job is to stay in the game until we get that burst of national oxygen, so we can light up our candidates. Because we all know that we're working for the next president of the United States. That's why we're here. And that's what gets us excited, and that's when we go to Iowa and New Hampshire. And so as you look at this, remember the news cycle twists so much that this thing is going to flip several times, and polls change quickly, as we've learned, especially in the last one in 2004.
Steve Grubbs, there's a mantra from your candidate, from Chip's candidate, some of the others, that says the so-called big three, Giuliani, Romney, McCain, are not true conservatives, that they're vulnerable because aspects of their records and of their current positions are just not conservative enough, maybe for conservative Iowans who dominate the caucus. Is that a talking point, or do you think that is the way that another candidate, a fourth candidate, yours or someone else's, actually will become the nominee?
Sure. When you look at how the candidates are positioned, you've got the big three, Giuliani, McCain, Romney, none of who fit real comfortably in the mainstream of caucus or primary voting Republicans in Iowa or South Carolina. maybe not even New Hampshire. And so what that does is it creates an opening for someone else. If you look at the National Journal that handicaps these things, they've got the Democrats, Clinton and Obama, Edwards at the top, but among Republicans, they've left that open. They don't have a front runner, and that's because there really is no good fit. And the reasons Republicans have to look at the Democrat primary in 2004 is because every caucus or primary since 1980, there's been a Bush or a Dole running out there, and for the first time, we really have this wide open race. But if you look at 3 years ago, in the first time that the Democrats broke was in the summer of 2003, and that's when TV ads started running, the campaigns got off the ground, and you had your first real break, and that's when Dean pulled out in front of the pack. And before that, it was just sort of general name ID, what I think that Giuliani and McCain have right now. The second big break in the race then came in January of 2004, as voters in the Democrat caucus had to really say, okay, I know we've been heading towards Dean, but let's take a serious look at this and make our final decision. And within that last week, then it broke towards Kerry. I think you'll see the same thing. Right now you've got name ID frontrunners. This summer, as the race gels, you'll see some significant movement, and then you'll probably see some final movement again in January of next year as it breaks again.
Rick, let me ask you something about what you can learn about the mood of the electorate, on the Republican side at least, and of rich people, from the fact that Governor Romney was able to raise so much money, more than anyone represented up here. Normally the Republican money leader is also the Republican poll leader and establishment leader. He had a horrible several months in the media during the period he was raising all this money. Does that tell you something about the mood of the Republican electorate, or something about Governor Romney, or both?
I think a little of both. I think this is going to be the most interesting campaign to watch for several reasons. One is because it is wide open, and there are a lot of people in the race. One is what Chip talked about. I mean, no one would have expected that George Allen would have been out of the race, and it seems that this one incident that ended up on YouTube, I mean, this is going to be the first YouTube campaign, and I'm not sure everybody has all the answers on this. We're going to have to watch it play out, but you're talking about campaigns in real time. It'll be very interesting for people like us who, and it's a lot of political consultants who like to control everything, control the message, control the image. That's out the window because people have access now. Think about blogs, just the blogosphere. And imagine, I know that Speaker Gingrich reads a lot of things that come across his email. So potentially now, someone out there who has a blog, he may actually see that, whereas a few years ago, just anybody writing a blog or anything, would that have filtered up to a candidate with all the material that comes in? Maybe not, but it's really interesting. There is actually a dynamic that's going on. I don't think people have figured it out, of how can you interact as a campaign with so many people at the same time. And I don't know if the money, to bring to your point, the money may not be as important this time. Because if you can, in fact, get a message out on a YouTube, on the blogosphere, on the internet, how does that, I'd love to hear what the other people think about that. How does that change the advertising? How does that, because that's what the money's for, it's for TV. And if TV isn't that important, then is the money less important? I think it's very exciting, actually.
Let me talk about that a little bit. Remember the 1984 ad that kid did for Obama? It was a wonderful ad. It was a takeoff on the Apple ad. And everybody, it was a big buzz, everybody talking about it. The only thing that matters to professionals in politics is, did it move the numbers? Doesn't matter how clever it is, doesn't matter. All that matters is, did it move the numbers? And in that case, even though it made all the news and everybody was talking about it, the kid got fired. I assume he had a job in about 8 minutes because it's a great ad. But it didn't move the numbers. I mean, nothing happened in the national polling that you could point to say that moved the ad. So the fact is, Rick, that although the internet is changing everything, the internet, I think, is like television was 15, 20, 30 years ago. It changes everything that it touches. It changed presidential politics with the 60 debate. It changes court cases. It changes the way Congress acts because it's on TV. And I think the internet is getting there. We're at the front end of it. When you're sitting up here, you will have said, and then over the next 15 years, these things happen. But I think that depending upon the internet, other than for fundraising, and I think that largely has to do with the amount of money it costs to raise an amount of money. The actual cost of sending an internet solicitation is infinitesimal as opposed to sending it by direct mail. I am yet unconvinced that the internet is having an effect on the numbers.
If I could just pick up, I agree with that. But think about the way the internet works in terms of voters. For instance, I have essentially created my own news service. I get The Note, I get Mullings, I get some things I like from the Wall Street Journal, I get something, but I've essentially have selected out what I'm going to get. And I don't necessarily pay attention to where, I'm not loyal to NBC, ABC, or, I'll be loyal to Fox News. But okay, my wife has a very different set of things that she selected out that people are communicating to her, and it has nothing to do. Rich said he got the Gallup poll today. I got the Gallup poll today. How many here got the Gallup poll today? Okay, how many of you got the Gallup poll today? Okay, a couple. But it's going to be a challenge for people to communicate when people are self-selecting, and most people, I suspect, they pay no attention to the Gallup poll.
No, that brings up about self-selecting, too, that is of interest. I think everybody in this room probably has a couple of characteristics that they probably think the next president should have. I think there's probably, honesty or what. Everybody's got an idea of the next president. Southern governor, conservative. That's a good characteristic to have.
Northern governor.
But what are the normal everyday voters getting fed right now? How much money you raised and how popular you are. And I'm just going to guess that there's not one of those two characteristics that anybody in this room thinks that should be the quality of the next president.
So how frustrating is that for your campaign?
Well, and for everybody's campaign, Romney not only raised more money than my campaign, he raised more money than all of us combined, and then spent more than all of us combined. I mean, that's a big part of the puzzle, but the internet is a way to segment into that right now. Most normal people, which there is not a normal person in this room, because if you were, you would not be here, don't even have a clue that a presidential campaign is going on right now. Don't have a clue. And I was back home in Nashville for Easter and ran into a couple, fairly good friends of mine. And, what are you doing? I just moved to Little Rock to manage Governor Huckabee's campaign. Great, what's he running for? I mean, there's still just not the level yet from everyday folks. The internet's part of that. The message thing will get out there. I think it's our job, like what Rich said earlier. Our job is to stay in the game until most people start paying attention. Now, in Iowa, Steve lives in this amazing place where they're acutely attuned to what's going on, and same in New Hampshire. But you get outside of that circle, it's hard to find many people paying attention.
If I can go back to the blogs for a second, it's we're working with the blogs. We talk to them a lot, but it's a little bit like playing whack-a-mole at this point. You never know what's coming when or from where. In the old days, we knew a bad story would be coming on, say, Governor Thompson, because y'all would pick up the phone and call us. But now, you get Google alert from the blogs pop up, and Governor Thompson's done something horrible to somebody somewhere that may or may not be true, and there's no way this person is ever going to call and ask about it. And so then you're trying to stuff it back in before it starts to get traction. So the difficulty we would face, I think, is deciding what to take seriously, how hard to push back, when, to whom, or do you lay back and not worry about that stuff and play offense with the blogs as well. It's an interesting challenge that, from a media perspective, you have to figure out how to do.
I'll tell you where the internet's having an impact is, and it goes back to YouTube. Excuse me. Early on and I say early on, back November, December, January of this year, Governor Romney was really starting to make some inroads in Iowa among social conservatives, pro-life voters. Then the YouTube clip of Governor Romney started going around the internet. And how many of you have seen the YouTube clip of Governor Romney in the debate with Kennedy? A lot more than saw the National Journal or the Gallup poll.
Right away, same venue.
I actually never saw his response, but
it was within a day.
Was it?
It was
Well,
pretty remarkable.
This email kept coming to me. Hey, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Wow! And it was the debate between Kennedy and Romney, where Romney proclaimed he was pro-life and pro-choice, and told why he was pro-choice, and he looked very believable in this position and very impassioned, and talked about a back alley abortion. And as that started spreading out, suddenly his inroads among this community was becoming stunted. And so I don't know if you'll see it reflected in the polling because he was just starting to catch a wave there, and then I think a lot of that has been muted, but I can tell you from a lot of people that I know, anecdotally, it made an impact.
So would you say in Iowa that it is still pretty open and
Sure. Here's the wonderful thing about the caucuses.
are religious conservatives still looking for a candidate?
Religious conservatives are looking, social conservatives are looking for a candidate. There are 90,000 people who participate in the Iowa caucuses. That's what, the size of a ward race here in Boston. And, you know, it's so few people that it's the way, you know, I did a research project last year where I went back and looked at the news clips leading up to the 1976 Democrat primary. And I couldn't find a mention of Jimmy Carter except buried deep in the articles. It was all Muskie and these other front runners. And then all of a sudden he organized his way to a victory. And it's one of the reasons that it's important, in my opinion, to keep Iowa first is because you can't buy Iowa. You know, if you're a poor candidate, rich candidate.
And so can you do that? Can you organize on limited resources?
Can you what?
Can you organize Iowa with limited resources?
Absolutely.
If you're not a Romney campaign?
You know, if you think about it, to reach those 90,000 voters 20 times through media is less than, it's about $1.4 million. That's 20 contacts with those voters. So everybody has a chance for, frankly, relatively very little money to contact that group of voters over and over.
Let me ask the group, and Rich, you may have some observations on this. We appear to have a unintended consequence here where we have large states who feel like they've been out of the process and too late in the primary process to have much impact, and as a result of that have moved their primaries up now. And some would observe that this actually makes Iowa and the early states even more important. But Rich, can a candidate pick a non-early primary state and focus their attention and resources there and hope to scratch without a concerted effort in one of the first four?
2 points. One, McCain did that in 2000.
Yeah, can somebody do a McCain this
Yeah,
time?
I mean, he just ignored Iowa and went right to New Hampshire and it almost caught the wave that stayed with him into South Carolina. So yes, you can pick and choose, but I think that Adam Nagurney a couple of weeks ago in the New York Times wrote a piece. He counted perhaps 23 states that might have their primary on February 5th. It seems to me that this also will change presidential politics forever, and I don't think anybody has any idea yet how. But I do think this, that in the olden days, if this ever happened, it's a great myth, so I'm staying with it, that you could start in New Hampshire, kind of get enough money to go into, start in Iowa, go to New Hampshire, stay alive, go down to South Carolina. If you were still kind of going strong, you could get up into Michigan and then work your way through the process. But if you're going to start this process on, what's Iowa, the 14th of January, somewhere in that area?
Tentatively.
where let's say that, and end on February 5th, 3 weeks later, it seems to me that if I were one of the non-announced, the Gingriches, the Fred Thompsons, or on the other side, the Al Gores, I would say, you know what, I'm not going to do anything until after Labor Day because I can run this as a 4-month campaign, spend the first 6 months raising $30 million, and buy the hell out of 23 states starting on December 26th when the Christmas shopping season is over, and we'll see who's standing on February 5th.
And is it over February 5th?
I suspect it will be, yeah.
It's absolutely over. I hate to ever disagree with Rich. It's not part of my mantra. But you can't raise $30 million and play in 23 states. I mean, California's a minimum $10 million play. New York's a minimum $10 million play. New Jersey's a minimum $10 million play. Florida's an $8 million state. Good news for us is we don't have to worry about that right now. It's not our problem. And so it really does for us. It focuses on Iowa and New Hampshire for us and makes the straw poll in August a lot more important because any of the big three guys that don't come in the top three in the straw poll, are they dead?
Okay, so let's say you do well.
Yeah.
You do well in Iowa.
Yeah.
And then how do you get to the $50 million you think you need?
Well,
In a week and a half. I mean,
the straw poll's in August.
No, but let's putting aside the straw
But the amount of free media that you get for winning, in my opinion, for winning Iowa or New Hampshire blows away the $50 million cash on hand.
No, I don't believe it.
Because you just look at California.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't believe that Californians care are going to say,
Well, they're going to be inundated. Aren't they going to be inundated on the news every day for 2 weeks of the winner of Iowa and New Hampshire, Governor Mike Huckabee?
Let me see a show of hands of the four of you who aren't in this colloquy. Who agrees with Rich on this? It's a pretty important debate. Who agrees that the money the free media catapulting out of an early upset will matter not at all in California.
Don't worry that I'm bigger than Rich.
Huh?
Don't worry that I'm bigger than him.
Yeah.
So.
Who you agree with, Rich?
Item 4,
I
there
tend
are-
to agree with Rich.
And
Yeah.
you three agree with Chip?
California are going to.
You agree with Rich? What about you two? You agree with?
I'd be with a different campaign if I didn't agree with him.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I worked for Steve Forbes 8 years ago, and we had a pretty healthy budget. We came out of Iowa
Have you been
and
anywhere?
came in second in Iowa, and we got a good bounce, but financially, even with his resources, he couldn't financially impact the rest of those states. What mattered was that the media made the race McCain versus Bush. And how you play your media bump coming out of Iowa or New Hampshire is really what's going to turn this thing. I just don't think there's enough money to impact the results on February 5th.
Well, let me redirect that at Rich, if I can. Rich, so are you suggesting then that somebody like a Romney, just a generically well-funded candidate, could ignore the early primary states and go put a $30 million buy in California and try and...
Well, he could have, but now he can't because he's in it. I mean, we were talking about this earlier. I guarantee you that in the early planning stages of the Romney campaign, nobody sat down and said, okay, here's our goal. We're going to raise $20 million by March 31st, and we're going to be dead tied with Sam Brownback. That's what we're looking for.
But let me ask you this. Would you rather, if you were Sam Brownback, would you rather win the Iowa caucuses or have $60 million in the bank on February 1st?
Yes.
Which would you rather have?
That's a good question.
Which would you
Well,
rather
but if I thought it's because they're two different strategies. If I thought I was going to preserve my cash for the big buy, then I would not compete.
Well, but if your goal is to win the nomination,
right.
Which would you rather do? Win the Iowa caucuses or have $60 million on February 1st?
I would rather have $60 million on December 26th.
Okay, then win the Iowa caucuses.
Yeah. Well, but I wouldn't have competed in the Iowa caucuses.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
but Rich is kind of creating his own rub. Nobody's saving this money. I mean, they're all spending it like crazy already. I mean,
That's
it's
my
not
point. That's my
official
point
yet.
about the late entrance.
Yeah.
They don't have to spend the first $40 million.
Right. But go ahead.
Let's say Romney has 40 million by August 11th in the caucus, and he finishes behind a Tommy Thompson or a Governor Huckabee. I mean, is he done then?
Right.
I mean, at what point does it become done? I mean, all three of the guys, Romney has to win New Hampshire, McCain has to win New Hampshire, and Giuliani wins New Hampshire. Two of those guys aren't going to win. I think three of them aren't going to win. But so are they dead after that, or you say they move on and they
I'm
can
saying that
spend
you
it
have a
all?
different strategy if you're going to hold. If you're not, you can't both compete and you can't do both. You got to pick one strategy.
But with
Yeah,
the
I got you.
possible,
Here's the other-
go ahead, Joe.
But here's the other possibility that you have to think about, which is, so just run a national campaign.
Right.
You don't have to run a 23-state campaign. You can run a national one.
Right.
And I have no idea, Mark, you would know much more than I, but if you chose to buy national networks nationwide, you chose to buy the right cable stations, I suspect, and you were a well-known commodity, and you had a set of ideas, I suspect you could do it relatively cheaply in a short period of time.
You could do it more cheaply than you could to target 18 states.
Well, bingo.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I mean, you wouldn't decide that you're going to dump $10 million in California.
But didn't the president run a national campaign before going into 2000?
No.
And then
Well,
Yeah.
not advertising.
right, but he
pre-meeting.
said he was running a national campaign, and then he got, whacked in New Hampshire, and then all of a sudden the media said it's all about South Carolina, which that's what it became. Forget that McCain won Michigan afterwards. I mean, it really did all became South Carolina because that's what the media said it was.
Well, can you run everywhere and win anywhere? I guess that'd be for Mark.
Well, the other variable is you have to have something to say. I mean, it doesn't, we've all seen candidates that had all the money in the world
That message thing.
and nothing to say. I mean, it doesn't do you any good.
Let me ask you about a big issue because we want to get the audience questions involved in pretty short order, but we've not talked about Iraq, which is obviously a very big issue in this campaign, and one on which most Republicans running have pretty much the same position. Do you all anticipate that that will continue? Senator Hagel, if he gets in the race, obviously has a much different position. Senator Brownback occasionally has a sort of different position. But do you all anticipate Iraq not being an issue that divides the candidates in terms of their issue positions? Do you anticipate that it's an issue that will begin to hurt Giuliani and Romney as much or close to as much as it's hurt McCain? How do you see that playing out the rest of the year for your candidates and for the field overall?
I have a hard time with these questions because I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, Rich would know better than anybody. I mean, the dynamic changes all the time, and dynamics change the way people think and feel about things. So it is staying in the game on top of the events as they evolve and be able to react to those events in a way that people can see. I think in Iraq, people are looking for a hopeful solution.
Rich, do you see any of the candidates now in the race dealing with Iraq better than the others, using Iraq or protecting themselves from Iraq in a way that's working to their advantage against the others?
Well, McCain has the advantage of having been in a war, being shot down. We know the story. So he's got a standing that the other candidates may not have to be able to speak about it in the terms that he does. If I were advising a campaign, I would say you don't want to separate yet. I mean, it's a little bit like a bike race. I mean, you know, in a velodrome, you don't want to be the first guy out because then you've got to be the one that's sort of got the wind in their face. I almost said breaking wind, but I knew that was the wrong thing. So what you want to do, I think, is to immerse yourself into the possibilities of what could happen, what might not happen. And then, as Rick said, as events transpire moving down the road, I mean, nobody knows what's going to be going on there in this November, much less next November. And I think any campaign that gets themselves boxed into a little corner is probably going to be wrong. And remember, we're talking about a Republican primary. We're not talking about the general electorate as a whole. It's a completely different dynamic.
Anybody else want to make a point about Iraq before we go to the audience?
Well, we think for Governor Thompson that his Iraq policy is a strength for him. He's outlined 3 points that are different, as far as we can tell, from the other candidates, and thus far as he speaks about it at every stop. It's well received, and he's signed up a fair number of supporters based on his proposals on Iraq. So we see it as a strength for him.
Okay. Mike's here and up there for those sitting up in the balcony. And please identify yourself and if Harvard affiliation, if any, and short questions, always preferred statements.
Hi, I'm Chuck, and I'm with the filmmakers here. And we were wondering, because we're at the John F. Kennedy School of Government, what do you think John F. Kennedy would have thought of today's campaign, and could he win if he would come back and run in today's media versus the media that he had? How would it affect his particular character and persona?
Excellent.
Well, the first thing is that he would be appalled at the length of time that goes into the campaign, and probably with the banalness of it all. And I think that I don't think you were asking about Iraq, which kind of plays into this. It plays into the Republican side just a bit. I mean, to say that Republicans are a little disillusioned right now would be an understatement. And the fact of the matter is that one of the reasons that there are other people who are thinking about getting in the race, whether it be the other Thompson or the people who are up here on the stage, they're saying that they're part of it is because there is this, I think, pretty strong hankering among the Republican faithful to say, let's have somebody who knows something, who can say something that can be a leader in all of this, in all of this stuff. And what we've got right now is we have because of the media, because of other things, we have a campaign based on soundbite, based on gotcha, based on who's going to say the nastiest thing about the next person the quickest, so that I can get up today. And for the most, so I can kind of move up or move on in the polls. And my own belief is, and I may be hugely naive about this, and that's fine. I mean, I've been wrong about lots of things my whole life. But my general feeling is that generally Americans are so disillusioned with the political process that they see, feel, and touch as exposed by both the media and the candidates that they are sick up to here with it. And anybody that could put it off, postpone it for a while, would be seen as a hero. And I think Kennedy himself would be appalled at the process that we're going through right now. Of course, back in 1960, I think there were 12 primaries total.
John Kennedy would have done extremely well, I think, in today's politics. He was able to raise money. He was able to communicate through television. And I think even though he had some issues in his personal life. I think Bill Clinton showed that voters will look past that. So and he was a tax cutter. I think John Kennedy would have succeeded in the modern environment.
So anybody else want to weigh in on that?
I would agree with that. I wasn't around. I wasn't born when Kennedy was president. Sorry, Rich. But I just want to take the opportunity to point that out. No, but the thing that strikes me about Kennedy is he talked about the future. And politics is always about the future. It's never about the past. And he cast a large vision, and I think that's people are looking for that. I think he'd do very well.
Well, he was one of the first real media candidate, and now with the proliferation of media, he probably would have been an even better candidate.
He understood television.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Right here.
My name is Ray Cudera, and I'm a student here at the Kennedy School. I just wanted to thank you all for coming. This is always a good part of our education here. My question is more concerned with the way in which the press is now covering these campaigns, namely the issue of character. Governor Romney recently made a comment regarding his hunting career, and there was a great quote in the paper about how leave it to Governor Romney to shoot himself in the foot with a gun that he does not have. My question, therefore, is then, being at the representative of candidates who are considered either the second tier or third tier candidates, how do you...
Or no tier.
Or no tier candidates. How do you deal with the media's obsession with defining character and sort of building a meta-narrative? And does it advantage you and your campaigns to sort of sit back while the front runners sort of explode in the media and are brought up and brought down, as we saw that happen in the Democratic primary in 2004?
Well, if your three opponents are standing in a circle and shooting at each other, there's no reason to jump in at this point, because you're going to take some of those bullets. So from our perspective, it's great to let them fight it out.
I think from a historical perspective, if you look at campaigns, everybody has their day in the sun, and everybody has their day when they are, when they're shot down. We all watch them bleed to death and laugh, and then we want another hero to come up and move up in the process. And while I've, in my previous statement, said I think it's appalling and horrible and all that kind of stuff, it has also become great sport in America for those 5,000 people who are really interested out of the 300 million in America about what's going on right now, to watch what happens to in the process. But you're going to see on our side, I mean, the next big story, this is like stealing a Mark Mckinnon line, is going to be the John McCain revival, because it's going to come. It's going to be the series of great speeches that he gives, and then all of a sudden he's the war hero who understands. And it's going to be like, and what is that? And where does that? And then you're going to have another surge that's going to come by Romney, and it's going to go on like that for a while. But here's the deal: no one cares, not right now.
Yeah.
They may later, and they may by February 5th, but today they do not.
Very, very predictable physics to this process, and that is that static is unacceptable. A static story is unacceptable, a static storyline. So the physics kick in, and as Joe said, there's going to be up, down, sideways, but there'll be the McCain's up, McCain's down, McCain's coming back. But the key is everybody's going to try and by the way, to your point about character, so a lot of these candidates are getting, particularly any of the top tier or front runner, which is a very difficult place to be early on in a race. So our strategy of not being the front runner, by the way, has worked out really well.
That's a good strategy.
And but a lot of these questions, somebody else made the point that voters aren't really tuned in now. So a lot of these bad stories that are happening for people, it's good to get them out of the way now. And Joe, maybe you want to talk about. Speaker Gingrich himself, I don't know if it was strategic or not, or what you want to say about that. But he had his own sort of mea culpa that was reported. But November of next year, this will be pretty ancient history.
I think everybody would agree one of the most important factors in winning the nomination is peaking at the right time. If you look in '96, Steve Forbes peaked a week to 10 days too early. He surged. He made the cover of Time magazine. It all happened 7 to 10 days too early, and then he fell and ended up went from first to fourth pretty quickly. And obviously, Kerry peaked at the perfect time 4 years ago. So everybody's sort of angling to peak at the right moment. And that's really the art of the science.
I'm not so sure if that's exactly how it works. And this might be a Newt-ism, and you guys would know better. So let me cite Newt, and if it's wrong, it's a good quote anyway. that
How good the quote is.
it is a good one. I believe Newt said this, that people vote the way men buy cars. That when it doesn't matter, whatever, if I wanted a new car, I would drive a Jaguar, I'd drive a Maserati if I could find one, I'd drive a Humvee. And every time I drove it, I'd say, that's the best car, I want that car. And then when it comes down to actually buying the car, when people actually go to vote, you buy the car that makes sense for your family, and when you write the check, you drive out with a Windstar, because that's what makes sense. So I'm not sure it's so much the peaking at the right time as that when people actually go to the polls, they are looking for something different than what they were doing when they were test driving the candidate.
I think that was Simon Cowell and not Newt Gingrich, but it's still a good point.
It is. If I knew who Simon Cowell was, I would agree.
Tell you after.
My name's Colin Motley, and I'm an undergrad here at the college. I actually member of the Harvard Republican Club, so I really appreciate you guys coming out. My question.
The few.
My question
The
pertains
few, the
more
proud,
to
the Harvard Republicans.
That's right. We represent. Anyway, my question pertains more to the policy side of how the race is going to shake out. I went to CPAC a few weeks ago, the conservative conference down in D.C., and they had a poll there that asked conference attendees to identify themselves either as a fiscal conservative, a social conservative, or a national security conservative. And about 50% identified as fiscal, 30% social, and 20% national security. And I think that's really maybe the greatest illustration of this sort of conservative coalition that Reagan built that's kind of carried the party through the last couple of decades. But my question is, given the focus that's been on Iraq, especially in the midterm elections, but a lot of other crescendos happening in terms of immigration, a lot of the things with the economy, whether that's going to end up being affected by the housing market, there's more than one issue that has the potential to develop. But what message do you think is going to be the dominant one from the Republican side? Are we going to go with a Giuliani type who's the strong fiscal conservative but not have the social side? Are we going to return the compassionate conservatives and focus on social issues? How do you feel that that's going to end up playing out in these campaigns, and which candidate, I mean, obviously I know you have vested interest, but which candidate do you think best addresses where that's going to end up?
Great question. Invite anybody on the panel.
Well, let me say first that whatever any of the 7 or 8 or 9 candidates that ever kind of get into this race, I think the most important thing that they have to remember is they better be talking about the future as opposed to the past, because we will lose a referendum on the past. So it has to be a future-oriented campaign, and there are really, as you adequately said, there are 3 legs to the stool here. One has everything to do with America and the values and the ideals that we hold in the cornerstone of our society. Another is about the security of the country and the safety of the people that live within the country. And the third is, can we make this government work? And if we can't do those 3 things, and we're not talking about those 3 things, the American people are going to say to whoever the eventual nominee is, gee, I don't think so this time. And so the message has got to be, in my judgment anyway, a very future-oriented message that is also solution-oriented, that you can say to people, we really do understand what it is that's going on. There are huge challenges that we face, and this is the way that we would go about meeting them. And I think that's an obligation that the nominee of this party has, and it's a pretty strong burden to carry also.
Let me just throw this in, and I'll let you question. Maybe you wrap this in your answer, but some would argue that because of the national security framework, that perhaps social issues may not be as important as they have been in past Republican primaries.
Well, and I am going to mention that too. I think there's 2 different parts of that answer for your question. One is there is a primary and then there's a general. And I think as you look at, for the first time, probably in a presidential campaign, those national foreign policy issues are going to matter to people when they go to the polls. Usually they say people vote their pocketbook. Well, I think that's going to be somewhat true. But I think in our primary, and we talked about this earlier, and it's no surprise here, we got beat last election for a lot of reasons. And one of the biggest reasons that most people say we got beat is because we lost who we were as a party. We kind of lost our way. And I think as you're looking through the primary part of it, they're looking for that leader that is hopeful and optimistic, not only for the country, but also for the party. We're kind of looking for our heart and soul again. Remember back to where we were in '94 when we had the contract with America, the revolution. We're looking for that again as a party. That's a different answer to your question, because that gets us through the primary. I say this, I think we're looking for a candidate that is authentic, somebody that knows who they are, somebody with a moral compass to lead the country. And I think as you look through that, you look through the different types of candidates, again, goes right to Joe's point about optimistic and hopeful. That's first and foremost. When we move to the general, then it's going to be a completely different set of issues going through. I think foreign policy is going to play bigger than it's ever played before, but I still think at the end of the day, we still have to address those pocketbook issues like health care. I mean, it is one of those issues that's driving up everything we talk about, whether it's the price of a loaf of bread or what's it run to a household. So it's a two different part, I think. I think it's different for primary and general.
Can I pick up on that? Chip mentioned healthcare, and following the last campaign, healthcare is one of the things that was on many people's mind. Iraq certainly was, but healthcare is in crisis in this country, and I didn't see anybody talking about it. I didn't see it get covered. I didn't see candidates talking about it, and no one had solutions on it. I'll throw a monkey wrench in your question, which is, if something, let's say something catastrophic were to happen, God forbid, people aren't going to care if Giuliani did a cross-dressing video that you can now download on YouTube. They won't care. They won't care. They'll say, will you kill the bad guy? Yes, you're my guy, whoever takes that leadership role. So again, it's going to be event-driven.
I have a slightly different view again. I think if we look at Arnold Schwarzenegger, it might be instructive. We'll be smarter in about 2 years. But when the recall was going on in California, it came down to a three-way race between the lieutenant governor, a guy named Bustamante, Schwarzenegger, and a conservative state senator named McClintock. And it was winner take all. So I was on some radio station in California, and I said to the listeners, okay, if a vote for McClintock, remember the California Republican Party is pretty conservative. If a vote for McClintock is in effect a vote for Bustamante, what will you do? And overwhelmingly people called in and said, well, they'd in essence hold their nose and vote for Arnold. All right, it's dangerous very dangerous to draw a graph with one data point. Lo and behold, we have last November. By this time, everybody knows about Schwarzenegger's social policies. They have a very clear idea of where he is, and lo and behold, he wins with 57% of the vote, and according to the LA Times, 91% of the Republican vote. A long way of saying, I think that it may well be, and this I know who said this first, Joe Gaylord said, we all think this is solitaire, but it's really poker. The other guys are going to play too, and I think Republicans may well look at the field as it coalesces down through time and say, who can win?
Hi, my name's Caleb Wetherell. I'm a freshman at the college and also a member of the Harvard Republican Club. My question is sort of related to Collins. We keep hearing about this void, this conservative void among the top three candidates in this election. And I'm wondering what you think it is about the top three candidates that's lacking to create this conservative void, if it exists, and how your candidates could step in to fill the void, if you think the void exists.
Could we just take our turn on
Sure.
candidates?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody would be here if they didn't think there's a huge void that exists on the social side of things. I tell people all the time I've got the terrible TB disease in politics. I do this because I love it. It's not necessarily my career. It's just absolutely love it. And when I look at some of the folks that are kind of the big three, they're missing a lot of the key issues that are important not only to me as a campaign person, but as a voter. And when I had an opportunity to go to work for somebody that kind of believes more like I do, kind of an authentic case and been doing it for his whole life, whether it's a pro-life issue, and I think Governor Huckabee frames it a little bit different. He says, I'm pro-life, and having said that, I don't think that pro-life position ends at birth. I think you also have to make sure the child has a good education and clean water to drink and good air to breathe. And I mean, I think it goes beyond that. I mean, to me, the governor speaks to me on those social issues that are important to me, talking about covenant marriages, talking about pro-life, talking about guns. All those issues, for me, being just a redneck from Tennessee, are important to me. And I don't see any of the other guys talking about it when you're talking about John McCain or Rudy Giuliani or Mitt Romney.
Speaking for a northern governor, which is a whole different set of calculus than southern governors, Governor Thompson was a four-term governor in what was very blue state. It's turning a little purple lately, but at the same time, what he is campaigning on is he has always been there for the party. He has always been the conservative who adhered to conservative principles. That has never wavered. In the 90s, two of the major priorities for the party were school choice and welfare reform. And what he did is he worked across the aisle. He wasn't a partisan gunslinger to get it done. He worked with Milwaukee Democrats to get school choice done. He worked with Democrats in the legislature to get welfare reform done. You know, he cut taxes by $16 billion. He vetoed 1,900 things without an override. You know, so that's the perspective he comes from to differentiate himself from the top three is on the core principles, socially, fiscally, he has always been there for the party and the movement.
Hi, my name's Ann Jeanette. I'm a student at the Kennedy School. I'd like to know from Mr. Grubbs, Mr. Saltzman, what specifically you're doing at this point to stay in the game with very little money, very little name recognition. Are you organizing the early states? What specifically, concretely, are you doing to stay in the game?
Governor Thompson is traveling to Iowa every week, and every week we go to a different part of the state and we meet with some portion of those 90,000 Republicans who will vote next January in the caucuses. And he's making significant progress. He's more than doubled his position in the polls and consistently is polling at fourth among the announced candidates. And so we feel pretty positive about that. And now that the governor just announced last week, and he's now actively and aggressively raising money, and we expect to be financially strong and organizationally strong as we head into the Ames straw poll August 11th.
Is that one fact that he will, in all likelihood, log more time in Iowa than anybody else? Is that one fact, do you think something, A, is significant, and B, puts pressure on the other candidates to go to Iowa more?
Well, I think it does. Everybody has to have the linchpin of their strategy. And we've not made any secrets of it. You know, we expect to exceed expectations in Iowa, and we have to. And from there, we will turn that into victories in states afterwards.
But do you think that if you're Giuliani or McCain or Romney's Iowa person, you're saying to headquarters, Thompson's here every week, we got to get on the ground more?
You know, they're probably not doing it yet, but as we begin to close the gap in the polls, they certainly will.
Chip.
Well, I always jokingly say we're living the dream. That's what we're doing. I mean, and I say that jokingly, but seriously, in our campaign, we are having a great time. And that's first and foremost. I mean, you got a lot of guys who have been through a lot of campaigns. If it's not fun, you're not going to be doing it very long. We started, he announced about 2 months ago that he was putting together an exploratory committee. And so we've literally been at this, I guess now 7 weeks raising money. Our first two big Arkansas fundraisers are in 3 weeks and 6 weeks to raise the money. And it's not unlike, I don't know how many campaigns you've been involved in. 10, 12?
Me?
Yeah.
None.
Okay, none, okay. It's not unlike any other campaign that you've been involved in. I mean, we're doing the basic blocking and tackling stuff. We don't have enough money to worry about all the fancy things. You know, we've got about 20-some people on the payroll, and we've got some key people in early states, like in New Hampshire. We got Deborah Vanderbeek, who is with Congressman Bradley, who's running the campaign there. In South Carolina, we got Governor Campbell's widow that's running the campaign there. These aren't people that are doing it for the money. I guarantee you they're not doing it for the money. They're doing it because they're passionate about a cause, and they're passionate about a man. In this particular case, Governor Huckabee, just like all these people are about their candidates. That is an important asset to any campaign. If you're doing it for the money and you hit a bump, if you're doing it for a cause, a small band of brothers can do a lot of things. And so I guess our strategy right now is we're working at this. I know it's kind of a cliche, but we've all been through this. I mean, we see this as a crusade. I mean, we wake up every day and we're excited about what we're doing. And so I think that makes part of the campaign a little different.
Does anybody know what Jimmy Carter spent up through Iowa, and would that be in today's dollars?
That's a great question.
Not a lot. Joe, what have you seen of the candidates who are currently in the race, like the two others represented here? What have you seen people do that you think represents maybe a best practice or a smart tactic to try to advance their position up into that first tier?
Not much. But no, I
appreciate the love.
No, well, that's because I haven't paid any attention to it. Because
he's not one of the 5,000.
I'm not one of the 5,000 this year. You know, it's not one of those things. I don't read the note every day, so I don't know what's going on. But I would say this: the most important thing, in addition to what they're doing, is is dealing with challenges that the country faces and having real solutions to real problems that affect real people every single day. And if they do that and can latch on to one or two very important things, they will catch fire. Because what people see out there right now is not answers. What they're seeing are cliches that are developed politically that some focus group said, gee, this is a good answer, so why don't we try that? And that's not what the country and Republicans specifically are hungering for. What they want is somebody who can articulate a position that makes sense, that wins supporters, that makes them feel good about their cause and have confidence in the future. And if any of these guys can latch onto that, they're going to do well. Because this is the one thing we know about America and politics. When somebody catches fire, they catch fire. And we've watched it, we've all seen it 100 times. And when you have an electorate right now, despite what Dan Baltz writes in the Post and what my good friend Adam Nagurney writes in the Times about how interested everybody is in the presidential campaign right now, I just think that's crap. I think they're on a different planet, and I think the people that are answering those questions are on a different planet. I think it's what they're expected to say. If the question was, do you think your neighbor's very interested in the presidential campaign? You'd get about 3% that would say yes, at least at this point.
Better way to frame that question.
Hi, my name's Jonathan Chavez. I'm a graduate of Harvard College, and for the past 5 years, I've been working with the Institute of Politics on their survey of 18 to 24-year-olds and their views towards politics and public service. In that time, maybe the most interesting trend that we've picked up on with this generation is their whole-scale rejection of the idea of American exceptionalism, that their foreign policy views are much different than previous generations, and their view of the United States as a global citizen is much different than many previous generations. How does that affect your candidates and your views of moving forward in foreign policy messaging and the foreign policy of the party in general?
Great question.
Well, that's a challenge for candidates. I wasn't around for Kennedy either. But my high school and early college years were Reagan, and a lot of people my age are Republicans because of Ronald Reagan, because we saw the difference between how Jimmy Carter made us feel about our country as compared to Ronald Reagan. And I think that challenge exists for every candidate. Every candidate who can, I don't want to say peddle, but sell and project optimism is going to have that same effect. And I can't speak for 1824 and how they feel, but that has to be the goal for a candidate. You can't go in as a candidate and say, yeah, we're second best now. That's not going to fly.
I pick up, well, I don't have a candidate because Newt's not in the race, but one of the challenges for 18 and 24-year-olds is actually go and vote. And until they do, because there's not historic data that they consistently vote, so campaigns are going to go, hunt where ducks are. They're going to target voters. And I'd be encouraged to see 18 and 24-year-olds get more involved. And I do agree with what you said about American exceptionalism, but on two sides. I do think America needs to be more aware of its role in the world. I think Newt described America as a huge elephant, and we get up every morning and we swing our trunk and we break family heirlooms, and we're very sort of uncomfortable to be around, and we think of ourselves as cute, cuddly, and adorable, but that's not how the world views us. On the other side, we need to communicate better to the world that, in my view, we are the most successful society in all of human history. I'm not saying that people need to be American, but there's a lot that people can learn about being America, about America, so that they can be prosperous as Americans. We are enormously prosperous. We're an enormously wealthy country, which is why it's sort of disconcerting today that we can't solve some of these problems, like the border control, like health care, like Iraq, like the response to Hurricane Katrina. And I think the Republican Party's brand is very, very damaged. I've seen polling that suggests that people think that Democrats are actually the party of lower taxes and smaller government. If that's true, this party's in deep trouble.
Anybody else want to?
I just want to say that it's a troubling notion to me that 18 to 24-year-olds would not hold the view of American exceptionalism. I think that has the thought that this is not, that America is not a great country filled with good people who do and accomplish amazing things, and is not felt by an entire generation of younger Americans, is, I think it is both worrisome, and I think it also says that we're probably not doing as good a job as we could in terms of some of the educational programs that we bring forward for students, both in terms of being involved in the process and a little bit about the accomplishments that the country has made and the changes that we have gone through for us to keep the position that we have right now.
I'll make 2 quick points. One, the reason that there is an immigration, call it issue, is because people want to get in. It's not because people want to get out. People are not breaking down the doors to get into Paraguay, to my knowledge. That's number one. Number two is, to get back to something Rick said, the thing that 18 to 24-year-olds do bring to the process, voting or not, and keeping in mind what I said earlier about moving the numbers, is that the most recent example in my mind is Barack Obama at George Mason University down in Virginia, where they had 3,500 kids showed up just to be in the same room with him, which generated an enormous amount of attention and enormous amount of enthusiasm moving outward. Now, whether that maintains or not, I don't know. But you wouldn't get that with a bunch of 60-year-olds. Like, I ain't going. I'm going to watch Law and Order reruns.
Can I follow up with you, Rich, since you're representing the Tancredo campaign tonight? You brought up immigration, and that is an issue that Tancredo was very focused on. How much of an issue will that be in the Republican primary, and how problematic might that be in a general election?
Let me go back to the run-up to the midterm elections. I speak a lot out of Washington, which is helpful because I get to talk to real people. And the 2 issues that Republicans were angriest about that I spoke to were spending, or too much government spending, and profligate spending, and immigration. So it's a huge issue. And Tancredo's kind of an interesting character. I don't think that he wakes up every morning saying, humming hail to the chief to himself to get used to it. I don't really think he thinks he can win. But he is one of the people that run for president because they have an issue that they want to focus attention on and get it into the public debate. And if he can stay around long enough to do that, then people may have to pick up the immigration issue. The president is taking a bill to the Congress, which he'll probably get. But I think that Tancredo is a good example of one of the 3 reasons I think people run for president. 1, they think they can win. 2, they think they want to be vice president. And 3, because they have a single issue that they think is very important, and the only way they can get a laser on it is to run.
Steve, this is not just an issue in Arizona and Texas and California, right?
Governor Thompson's done a lot of events in Iowa, and at almost every single event, he's not asked about abortion, but he is asked about borders. And it's a big issue, and it's driven, interestingly, by CNN and Fox together. You have Lou Dobbs, Bill O'Reilly, and a lot of other commentators, and I think they'll continue to drive it, and I think it'll continue to be a big issue.
But there's also immigrant labor force in Iowa, right? That's
yes, that's one of the part of the changing face of Iowa is that the big plants that process hogs and cattle are largely staffed by either immigrants or illegal immigrants, and it's becoming a bigger issue in Iowa.
There's some open mics. We'll take this question. If you're not at one of the open mics in the next few moments, this will be the last question. But if you have one you want to ask, head to one of the open mics, please.
Thank you. I'm Nancy Johnson. I'm a fellow at the IOP, formerly keenly interested in your work. I certainly agree that spending and immigration and health care are all very important issues. To what extent do you think the party is going to struggle in this election because of its over-identification of religion and politics? In New England, that's a very decided influence on that base Republican comfort with being a Republican. And I'd be very surprised if it isn't a bigger factor in the Northeast, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, than we are acknowledging.
As a negative factor for the
As a negative factor, this, the view that somehow your religious beliefs should drive public policy. And it's driven stem cell, it's driven, it's not just abortion anymore, Chavez, so I find a whole different level of disaffection among Republicans that is much more profound, doesn't contradict original beliefs of Republicans and individual responsibility and balancing the budget and a lot of other things, the kind of things that Tommy Thompson has spent his life doing, which may end up to be one of his advantages in this environment. But I'm not going to really ask you to comment whether you think you have to disentangle your candidate from this brand of political religion that the National Party has developed. But I think it's an albatross that if you don't start speaking directly to, our ticket will be heavily burdened by.
I think, Nancy, that it's that the days of the Christian Coalition and Ralph Reed are gone. I mean, they can't make or break a candidate anymore. But the religious right is. We're not going to debate this, are we?
She's poised.
I know.
Just don't yield back the balance of your time.
I think she yielded.
Gentlemen, yield no. But I think that one of the reasons it still gets a lot of attention is because the press corps, largely liberal in its leanings, loves to point out the fact that a James Dobson, is it James? Mm-hmm. Dobson, can say something and it means something to some segment of the population. It would not mean nearly as much if the press corps didn't play to that. And I'm not sure what effect it'll have on the party's candidates in next fall. But I do think that it probably isn't a good idea for a Republican who wants to, in my estimation, be looked at as a winner to go chasing too far to the religious right. I agree with you.
Any other observations on
Yeah,
that
I mean,
question?
since it's the last question, you might as well throw it on fire a little bit. I understood your question, but I'm not sure I'd want a candidate that doesn't make a religion and a part of his candidacy. For me, faith is who I am and where I came from. And it defines who I am as not only as a person, but I hope it would define me as who I am as a leader. And I want to think that our president's the same way. I think it's important to know those kind of issues when it comes to our leadership, whether it's in the Congress or the City Council. Like I said, for most people, for a lot of people, whether it's a Christian religion or a Jewish religion or a Muslim religion or no religion, their faith defines them. Good and evil, right and wrong. I think those are things that are important and ingrained part of our country and our society and our politics. And I think to separate those two things kind of gets us in trouble a little bit. So I mean, I'm probably in this crowd here, probably going to have a lot of fun questions after everybody's gone. But I think it's important for candidates, especially for the highest office in the land, to look at their religion and their background so we know who they are as a person.
Great, that's a great response. I have an observation I'll throw in as well, which I think you're right in terms of sort of Northeastern Republicans and more secular Republicans around the country do share that concern. At the same time, there's an interesting thing happening on the Democratic side of the equation, which is they're talking about it more. In other words, they're saying we haven't been in this dialogue, and we better get in it if we want to win the presidency. So just the opposite condition is really happening on the Democratic Party.
They're still entering at the point of faith.
Yeah.
Faith is not the issue.
Right. No,
it's imposition of
policy,
religious
faith.
ideal,
Yeah.
one religious specific belief on others. And while the religious right, I agree, is gone, the consequences of their presence, I don't believe, are gone. So there's a way to turn this around, talking about faith, but recognizing the that the government doesn't have the right to make a policy that imposes the specific doctrines of one faith on others of other faiths, including issues of life.
Rick, did you want to say something?
Well, I'm having a hard time with this one. I grew up in New Hampshire, and so that's not very, is in New England. So there are regional differences. Certainly when you go into the South, people are much more open about their faith. I now live in Virginia. People are much more open about their faith. That's not to say that people in New England aren't faithful. They don't wear it on their sleeve. Culturally, they react in different ways. But I don't know how people could not be elected and not make decisions based on their faith, but to impose them on others, of course not. But people are going to be guided by their faith. I mean, Jefferson wrote the premise. He wrote that we are endowed by our Creator. I think he meant God. So that is the foundation. That is the premises in the Declaration of Independence. We are given certain inalienable rights through our Creator. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And if we don't, the question is, if your rights don't come from God, I have a simple question. Where do they come from? And if they come from man, we're in deep trouble because we've seen that model fail in totalitarianism, communism, Nazism, and all the rest of it. So,
that was an excellent way to end, except Joe has something he wants to say.
That's right.
This will be a more excellent way.
Now, mine is just an observation about the way that politics and ideas move through their ebb and flow. And I think that we are in a position right now where you are kind of, it's in a melting position. And ideologies are a little more amorphous than they were. I think that there's no question in my mind that we are still a center-right country by majority, but I think that there is also that you have a desire by people, even though they were driven in both parties by the outside extremes of the party, of both parties in the nominating process. There's a desire of this great majority in the center that says, please be tolerant, please try to solve our problems, please try to make our life a little better, and kind of leave a little of your proselytizing on the table because we have other issues that are also very important to us. And I think we're in the process of watching that change. I don't think it's changed totally for our party yet. I don't think it's going to, in the next 18 months, but I think we're in the process of moving in that direction.
If I might just add one, because I worry about this, what Joe is saying, because if this campaign isn't about solutions, and it is about, no offense, Mark, if it ends up being, I've assembled more people who hate Bush and you've assembled people who hate Kerry, you can't get a mandate out of that. There was no mandate coming out of the last election. And if we are stuck in that model, and this campaign turns again into that model, I don't know why you'd want to be president. You'll never get anything done. You cannot get things done unless the country is giving you a mandate to get them done.
I have a thought for closing here, since this is something where we will be reviewing it at some point in the future. Let me go around through the panel and ask everybody's prediction for the top 3 finishers in Iowa.
On the Republican side?
Mm-hmm. In order.
You want in on this, Hal?
In order.
Go ahead, Mark. I want you to do it.
Go.
Well, you and I have been arguing over this for months. I think Fred Thompson first.
And by the way, let's make the assumption that everybody's in.
Yeah, everybody's in. Fred Thompson, John McCain, and Giuliani. In that order.
Okay. Joe?
Having spent 8 years in Iowa, and running the state party for a while back before it was important, I don't have a clue yet. I mean, I really hate to kind of beg out on this question. But
no, come on, step up to the plate.
I'm not going to step up to the plate. I'm not going to do it. I mean, I just don't know. I just don't have any kind of conclusion about it because I think it's so amorphous at this point.
Steve.
I'm going to assume that Fred Thompson's not in the race. I don't believe he'll pull the trigger, but maybe you guys know something I don't know. I would say McCain, not in this order. McCain, and I would say Giuliani, and I would say Tommy Thompson. I think those will be the top three.
This is being taped, right?
That's right.
I will say Thompson, Romney, and Huckabee.
I was about to say, since I'm obviously the only true politician at the group and we're all going to dinner afterwards, it's going to be Huckabee, Thompson, and Gingrich.
Wow. He is popular in Iowa.
I'm going to agree with him.
Tommy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Tom.
All right, we'll write all those down. Want to thank you all for coming. On your way out, if you're not Joe Gaylord, you can get your I'm in the group of 5,000 t-shirts as a gift. No, just kidding. I may have to get those printed up because I saw a lot of excited faces. But thank you all for coming. Obviously, thank you all for coming, giving up time in your busy lives. And thank the Shorenstein Center, Alex Jones, and Governor Shaheen and the IOP who are not here, and staff of both organizations who worked on this. Christian Flynn in particular, I think, if I'm not mistaken, spent the most time on it of anybody and did a great job on all of them. So thank you all for hosting us. And again, thank you all for coming, and thank you all for coming.